All right, all right, all right. Hello, Linda. How you doing? Pastor Williams with us. We're going to, of course, get great news from her today. Great, good news. Cannot wait to hear this message she has for us this morning. You know what we're going to be talking about with Dr. Furholden and Dr. Knighton today. Uh, Pastor Williams, we're going to talk about the protocols that you need to follow for the holiday weekend. You know,
Oh,
we,
we need that
you know,
for
we're
sure.
getting out here and we will be traveling. We will be at picnics. We will be doing all of these things. Um, and hey, how should you handle the
Mm.
holiday? Really, what should you be watching out for? How should the food stay covered at a picnic? I mean, just things like that. And should you insist upon that?
Right.
Um, and what if the what if the festivities are shifted indoors? How do you do that? Because it's much cooler in
Right.
Chicago now. You can feel like summer moving out the air and fall setting in. There's a summer
Same here.
77 and then there's a fall 77. It is feeling more like fall today. So, but then we're going to talk about the Elijah McClain case, the young black man, 24. He was really a kid who was killed out in Colorado in 2019 when he was killed. And it was horrific. He was an introvert walking home, um,
Hmm.
and he was a little bit of an interesting young man. He used to play the violin at the animal shelter. Very clearly, very very sensitive young man, and he was apprehended, and the way he was treated was just absolutely horrible. Um, Forcibly handcuffed, and treated in such a harsh manner that he vomited on in the mask, and they didn't help him. And then when the EMTs got there, they gave him a drug. Uh, he was 5'6", about 140 odd pounds,
1 minute.
and it should have been. They gave him drugs that would have felled a man more than 200 pounds and much bigger.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
they were not charged. All five of these men were not charged in 2019, but they were just indicted this week. So we're going to talk about that case. And then voting rights in Texas. There's a lot going on in Texas. I can tell you that. Whew. So let's get right to it, everybody. Good to be with you today. Hope that you are getting ready for a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Raphael, how
Yeah.
you doing? Raphael and A. King from Push. Oh, Dave Dowling. Hey,
Coming
Linda.
up in 10.
Of course. Thank you.
The world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It is Friday, September 3rd, 2021. Labor Day weekend is upon us, everybody. Celebrating, honoring those who work and those who want to work. Amen, 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 amen. Sending you all much love today. I'm Santita Jackson, coming to you from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want you to meet my morning stars, Linda and Dave and Raphael from Brazil, and A. King from Memphis and Zenobia, and Linda and everybody else. I want you to meet us all on the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook and on WCPT 820's page on Facebook. I want you to meet me on Instagram, Santita Jackson IG, and on my Twitter feed, at Santita J, at Santita J. I want you to call me or text me at 773 763 9278, 773 763 9278. GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text to that number. What will we be talking about today? We're going to talk about the Elijah McClain case, a young black man, 24 years of age, a very, very sensitive young man. He even used to play the violin, everybody, in the animal shelter. And he was walking home, was apprehended by the police, and in 2019, uh, those five persons who were involved who aided and abetted his death, well, they were not charged. Well, there was an indictment returned. There was an indictment returned this week. So we're going to talk about that. What changed over the past 2 years? And when you hear the details of the case, it will make your heart drop. It will. This young man should not be dead today. What lessons can we learn from this? What can we learn? And then voting rights in Texas. I know I keep pounding the drum on voting rights, but we have to do that. Our voting rights make all of our other rights possible. And has Roe v. Wade for all intents and purposes. They've got it that. And they've done it in a very interesting way, as we discussed yesterday. Now, any citizen, anywhere in any of the states, can say you've had an abortion, and doctors and the nurses and everybody can get in trouble. The Uber and Lyft drivers can be fined. All of this that's happening in Texas, but losing your voting rights, drive-through voting, mail-in voting, all of that. Uh, a lot of that has been pulled away. Got to talk about that with Dave Daly. And then, how will you handle the Labor Day weekend? How will you walk through it? What should your behavior be at a picnic? What happens if the picnic is moved indoors because of inclement weather? We're going to talk about that with Dr. Deborah Furholton and Dr. Shanina Knighton, helping you to stay safe during this Labor Day weekend holiday, everybody. So, before we get to Pastor Tisha Williams, for some good news. We always love to get good news from her. I want you to like and share, everybody. Like and share, everybody. Lorraine, hope you are safe up there with your mom up in New York. Shirley from beautiful Philadelphia, Zenobia, Raphael, Barbara, everybody. Carol, please like and share, like and share, like and share. Please, right now, like and share, like and share. All right, everybody, let's get to some of these headlines. Chicago, we will have a high of 77 degrees today. It's mostly cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 66 degrees and showers. The Dow closed up yesterday, 131 points. The Nasdaq closed up 21 points. The S&P 500 closed up 12. The Twins will be playing the Rays today. The White Sox will be facing off against the Royals, and the Cubs, well, they bested the Pirates yesterday, 6-5. Wow, everyone is talking about this hurricane. Let's talk about it. Hurricane Ida. Hurricane Ida has wreaked havoc all across the country. At least 58 people dead nationwide. Nationwide. Billions of dollars of damages stretching from the Gulf Coast to the Northeast, and it has spawned new warnings from scientists and elected officials that climate change has increased the risks of powerful natural disasters. The death toll as of today rose to at least 44 persons across New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania, where high winds and flash flooding left extensive damage, and at least 200,000 homes were without power. And some people, everybody, died in their basements. They drowned. The New York Times describes some of those who died in New York and New Jersey, including people who have been submerged in their cars as well and trapped in structures ripped apart by the storms. In Louisiana, fatalities climbed to 13 and were expected to rise from there. 1 million people lost power on Sunday in Louisiana and Mississippi, and hundreds of thousands still today are without power. Sending them much love and many prayers, everybody. Just think about it. People in Louisiana, many of them are without transportation, gasoline, cell service, or money. No electricity, no power. Let's think about that, everybody. President Biden will travel today to meet in New Orleans with Louisiana state and local officials to personally pledge all available assistance from the Federal Emergency Management Agency and other federal departments. Indeed, this storm has shown really inequity. The climate crisis, indeed, from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says that it's an inequality crisis. Among the people most at risk, she said, during flash floods are those living off the books basement dwellings that don't meet the safety codes necessary to save their lives. If you can believe, people drown to death in their homes, trying to stay safe. Who knew? Who knew, everybody? Democratic and Progressive hopes to pass a massive $3.5 trillion reconciliation package. Hit a major speed bump, everybody, on Thursday as Senator Joe Manchin, Democrat from West Virginia, called on party leaders to hit the pause button, as he put it, and poured cold water on the possibility of supporting a bill of that size and scope. He wrote in an op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal. He questioned the price tag of the proposal and the effect the package that amends could have on inflation, an issue Manchin has raised in the Senate Democratic Conference. What do you think about that, everybody? It's an infrastructure bill. And when we look at the infrastructure that has taken such a hit just from this one storm alone, what do you think about that, everybody? He added that his colleagues should slow down the process of passing the bill, which is considered the cornerstone of the Biden agenda and of American progress. He wrote, instead of rushing to spend trillions on new government programs and additional stimulus funding, Congress should take strategic steps on the budget reconciliation legislation. A pause is warranted because it will provide more clarity on the trajectory of the pandemic and it will allow us to determine whether inflation is transitory or not. And those are some of the headlines on the Santita Jackson Show. I need some good news, everybody, and there is someone who gives it to us just the way we need it every Friday. Indeed, Pastor Tisha Dixon Williams, we're so glad to have you with us. Of course, First Baptist Church in Bridgehampton, New York gets you all the time, but we're so glad that we get you some of the time. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much, as always, Santita, for having me this morning.
Oh, you're a jewel.
And good morning to all of you. We're talking about good news, and today I want to talk about joy and happiness. I know Al Green talked about love and happiness, but today I want to talk about joy and happiness. Coming from the book of Philippians 4:4, Paul says these words, "Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice." In Paul's various letters to the churches, he used metaphors to describe the life of a believer. And here in his letter to the Philippians, he's comparing our life's journey to a race. And we see Paul, the athlete. And one of the key things he says to conditioning and running this race is joy. It's almost impossible to examine the book of Philippians without acknowledging the main theme of joy. That very word is mentioned in various forms at least 16 times throughout the book. It is considered Paul's joy letter to the Philippian church. And over the years, the real meaning of joy has been used for everything from a woman's name to a yellow bottle of dishwashing liquid. But the real definition of joy is the emotion of great delight or happiness caused by something exceptionally good or satisfying. When he wrote this letter, Paul was in jail. But despite his circumstances and imprisonment, Paul was still able to support those he loved and encourage them to be glad and rejoice with me. But I'm confused. Rejoice with you, Paul? How can you even rejoice at a time like this when you're in prison, chained to a Roman guard? You see, Paul's joy was not influenced by his current state of affairs. Paul's body may have been bound to a prison, but his spirit was bound to God. Paul wasn't happy, he was joyful. And a lot of times we get that confused. You see, happiness depends on what happens, but joy is something deep down. Joy depends on God. Happiness can change at a moment's notice. You could be up 1 minute and down the next. You could be whistling 1 second and crying the next. That's a life built on happiness and things and outside influence. But when you are in the Lord, the joy that comes from Christ in you burns constantly, no matter what situation you're in. In one of my online preacher groups, a colleague asked us to help her illustrate the difference between happiness and joy for her congregation. Here's how I always describe it. For those of you who have a gas stove, you understand the importance of the pilot light. The pilot light is a small gas flame that's kept burning in order to serve as a power source for the gas burners. And it's located just under the hood of the stove. Happiness is like the 4 burners of the stove. They can be adjusted based on the circumstances. The flame can be turned up, turned down, and even turned off based on the needs of the cook. But regardless of how high or low the burners are, the pilot light is always burning just below the surface. Regardless of what's happening in your life, you can be up, down, and even out. Joy should always be burning on the inside. It may not be visible, but it's there just below the surface. If the pilot light goes out, then the stove doesn't function. And guess what? If you don't have joy, you don't function. Paul knew in order to run this race, he had to be fueled up. He needed joy on the inside. Joy gives us the power to run this race. Joy is your spiritual Gatorade. Any athlete will tell you you have to stay hydrated. Well, who better to keep you hydrated than the living water? Most of us live busy lives. Often we're so busy juggling tasks and responsibilities that we forget to take the time to do the things that bring us joy. Don't you know joy and optimism provide a 51% reduction in the rate of heart disease? So try one of these things to bring joy back in your life. Number one, give yourself the permission to have little joy breaks throughout the day to instantly lift your mood. Number two, count your blessings. If you're having a particular difficult day, you might find it tempting to focus on the negative aspects of your day, but instead focus on things that are going well and positive for you. And lastly, shake things up and do something new. As the old adage says, familiarity breeds contempt. And that's certainly true when it comes to our daily lives. So try something completely new and rediscover your joy. You need joy to be strong in this race we call life. The joy of the Lord is your strength. And that's the good news.
Amen to that. Thank you so much. I think we have to
You're
understand that there
welcome.
is a difference between joy and happiness. And people, my mother,
Absolutely.
my mother always says, happiness, and she just waves her hands and rolls her eyes. She says, "You all so silly. You don't even understand.
Happiness is fleeting.
It's fleeting." She said, it comes and it goes." She said, "There's some
Yep.
things that you need to understand that sustain you, you know, being anchored
Hmm.
in God, your joy,
That's right. That's right.
values, in a marriage, for example. It's like, wait a minute, said you're gonna
Hmm.
be up and down, in and out with anybody. You do that with your friends. Of course you're gonna be that way with someone you live with. But what
Hmm.
sustains you, your values, the things that brought you together from God in the first place, right? So many, the healing that you're supposed to experience with another human being. I mean, it's just all of that. And I want to thank you for bringing us on point on that today, because I think we need that. We need that. Particularly, as many of us are going to have these family get togethers this weekend, which can be a challenge.
We're going to for our joy.
you, you know it. Oh my gosh. But it's all of that. And then there is also the anxiety of moving around in this pandemic. I want you to stay right here because we've got Dr. Deborah Furr-Holden, brilliant epidemiologist, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University. Um, and she is someone who's been pushing equity, Pastor Williams. I mean, equity. She said, yeah. But you know what? Everybody's not getting what they need. All communities are not, we're created equal, but we're not treated equally. We're not treated with equity. We saw that for Holden with this storm. As we find out about these storms that have gone from the Gulf of Mexico straight up to the Northeast, and we've seen all of these people who've been killed. When they got up to the Northeast, it got to be the character changed. It wasn't a hurricane, but it sure was a heck of a storm. And people drowned in their basements, Dr. Verholden. They drowned in their basements. Wow. Um, what do you think? Do you think people are at greater risk for spreading COVID as people have to gather in shelters? And certainly in Louisiana and in Mississippi, many people they can't even get to the shelter. They're just having to stay at home and be, without any air, any fans, or anything like that. Are we at heightened risk when we have these disasters that sweep over us in a pandemic?
Well, yeah, good morning first.
Good
Um,
morning.
yeah, good morning. Any kind of disruption or disaster will sort of upset the balance of things. When you have these kinds of disasters, I mean, literally, even people having to, evacuate from their homes suddenly. The one thing I think many of us have had to embrace is preparation. Think about during the pandemic when you couldn't buy toilet paper
Mm.
or paper towels or milk and eggs or hand uh, sanitizer or bleach. Or I mean, I literally remember even to this day we have bleach and ammonia problems
Mm-hmm.
at our sort of local stores. They don't seem to be able to keep enough of it on the shelves. And so whenever because we put a little cap full of ammonia in all of our laundry.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever I see ammonia at the little local store where I, shop for paper towels and things like that, I buy them multiples. So we learned a lot around preparation and how important it is to be prepared because we're trying to mitigate the impact of something that's spread through the air. that spread through droplets. So anytime you increase the people coming in contact with one another, you're increasing opportunity and possibility for spread. Having people's lives uprooted and disrupted in a day because of a natural disaster, whether it be the people that were evacuating their homes or the people who now have come through and now have to find safe shelter. And then, of course, what are the conditions under which people are living? You know, I don't know if you've ever been to one of these shelters or the places that people go in these kinds of crises. They tend to be large open areas. Everybody is being exposed to everybody else. You know, I don't think we've had to deal with something like this also in the midst of a pandemic with a virus that spreads through the air and can also be spread through touch. But the air thing is what is the game changer for this. The fact that we're just breathing it in and breathing it out and we're exposing each other through something that we have no way to get around. There's no way to get around breathing. I think is the real problem. And I can't imagine that the protocols in these places, if they weren't prepared, could even come close to being what they need to be to keep people safe and protected.
You know, we're talking with Dr. Deborah Holden, an epidemiologist from Michigan State University. She's the Associate Dean for Public Health. And we're in a pandemic, and yet many of us are going back to school. We're getting back out, living life the way we wanted to live it, the way we were living it before the pandemic. But how do we do that? We're going to bring on Dr. Shanina Knighton at the bottom of the hour to help us the two of you are going to help us to walk through how we need to get through this weekend, because Dr. Verholden, people are going to be traveling, people are going to be going to picnics. You know what? Sometimes if it rains, you're going to have to move the picnic indoors, and then people like you have a newborn at home, right? I mean, and then you have babies running around. I mean, there's just so much that we need to be doing so that we can be careful in this pandemic. I'm finding this, so I want to find out from you. More than 80% of Americans 16 and older have had some level of immunity against the coronavirus. And yet, this report also says that more than 39 million Americans have been diagnosed with coronavirus. Trying to get the numbers together. If 80% of Americans, more than 330 million, that's more than 264 million people, have some level of immunity, and 39 million have been diagnosed with the coronavirus. Some of us have, what is natural immunity? What is that?
Well, the human body is an amazing thing. So if you are exposed to a pathogen or a virus, your body has a natural immune response. So you will, mount your own defense. The vaccine is just trying to give your body a running start in a way that's safe without exposing you to the actual virus itself, to build up that defense, such that if you encounter the virus, you've already got, some fight ready. And so people will develop natural immunity. And we hear all the time people talk about the very low death rate. And so sometimes people say we don't quite understand what the big deal is. And what I tell people is there's two things that are a big deal. One, the death rate is not the only thing. We're not just trying to prevent death. We're also trying to prevent illness and the long-term disability that comes with illness. So natural immunity is when your body just fights it off and you build your own defense against future infection. And most people will be able to do that. What we're finding specifically with COVID, and this is not just true of COVID, it's true of many other conditions, is while COVID is working on you and your body is building up immunity and mounting its defense, it is wreaking havoc. It's like the equivalent of having somebody break into your house. I had somebody break into my house. It turned out to be 3 adolescents. This was in Baltimore. And they just wreaked havoc. They slid up my furniture.
Oh my.
They threw a big thing of seasoning salt into my big, beautiful fish tank. They slashed the tires on my stepdad's truck, which was in the driveway. They took all the pictures off the wall and punched holes in the walls, I guess thinking I was some kind of wealthy person who had some safe hidden behind something in the wall. So they removed all these large pictures and punched holes in the walls. They did a lot of damage in my house. And so when it was all said and done, I had homeowners insurance and all that. But I had to go back and repair all the damage that was done. This is what happens in the human body with COVID. Even though I was able to, my neighbor saw them, somebody called the police, they ran away, I was able to get my home back. I had to then repair my home. Your body has to then repair itself from whatever damage COVID does to you while it's wreaking havoc on your body. And some people don't do as well in that recovery process. So
But
I
you
tell
know,
people all the time, this is nothing you want to play with. You don't want to get COVID and roll the dice and hope that you'll be one of the people where it doesn't do a whole lot of damage to you and you recover and can get back to life as usual. This issue around long
absolutely.
COVID is not trivial.
Well, you know, but that's why when you explain it that way, it is so helpful. That is not how this has been
Yeah.
explained by most people, and you know it. We now just have people who are pushing um, a vaccine, and it makes a lot of people uncomfortable. I mean, that's just a fact. It is. It's a fact.
Well,
I
and,
mean,
and I can understand that
I
because,
got 10
we're doing
seconds.
some work now. Oh, well, then we'll have to do it another time because I want to
Let's,
talk about pregnant women or women planning to become pregnant and COVID versus the vaccine.
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because life is going on, everybody. Stay right here on the Santita Jackson Show. Let's talk about how we're going to get through this weekend. How we're going to get through this weekend with COVID, with the pandemic. I'm Santita Jackson. Stay right here with more of the Santita Jackson Show. If you want to hear the podcast of the show, go to WCPT820.com/Santita at the end of the show. It'll be up there without commercials. Back in just a minute.
Everywhere. Take the time.
Dr. Deb?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. Well, we've got, you know what, next week I'll be back on the air by Wednesday. And so let's do that. Let's do that because I would like
Yeah.
to. I would
got
like
a
to
great
talk about.
colleague too who's an OBGYN.
Okay.
I would love to have her on too
See if she'll come
so we
on.
can really talk about that.
See,
Because
yeah.
I also would love to really give people a sense of how it is that COVID wreaks havoc. Like what people need to understand is the receptors that COVID binds to are everywhere in your body.
Well, why don't you do
They're
this?
in your brain, heart, lungs, reproductive organs.
Well,
So anywhere this virus binds in your body, it has the potential to wreak havoc.
why don't we do this before we go into the how we can try not to get COVID this weekend, whether you have gotten the shots or not, because people are going to go to picnics. Picnics, it might rain, and the picnics have to be moved indoors. All kinds of stuff where you might be under a tent together outside. I mean, there are a lot of questions that we have. Would you go into that just very, very quickly? Uh, about 3 minutes or so, and just let us know why
Sure.
COVID is something that
We
you
have
want
Dr.
to avoid, right? We want to
Yes.
do that. And I need you
Yes.
all to, of course, be in tandem with each other. Is Pastor Knight, excuse me, Pastor Knighton? Well,
Dr. Knighton's with us, yes.
You love giving people credentials.
I sure do. Well, when you have a ministerial zeal about the work that you do, that's how I feel
Yes.
about it. Well, is
Yes.
Pastor William still there, or did she leave?
Yes, I'm still here.
You know what? Why don't stay with us? Because you are in a public setting, and if you want to jump in, please do that. Because I
Good
think
morning, Dr. Deb. Congratulations.
Thank you. I got a grandbaby.
Oh, so exciting. Congratulations.
oh, I love it.
Just real quick, I'm gonna make all of y'all's morning super fast.
Are you going to send a picture?
I'm gonna send it.
Are you going to post it?
You had it. I will post it. I've been so terrible. I've been so terrible with posting and being on social media over the last couple months, but I'm gonna post it.
Oh,
Oh, I love it. That she is just a sweet preciousness. I tell you that.
well, it's like this meme says, I don't have to post it. I'm with them in real life.
Oh my gosh, I
Right.
love it.
The posting is for y'all. It's for y'all.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
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 Try not to. Just let that settle in and enjoy your morning with these cute little pictures. I don't think y'all are ready.
Now are you putting it up on StreamYard? Or did you send it so I need to post it?
I just touched
1 minute.
Okay. All right, well let's get on up.
and I don't know why I let that woman snooker me. I was transportation. I have on not a stitch of makeup, not an eyelash or nothing. But somehow, she said, oh, let's just take one picture with grandma. I said, I'm fine. We were all natural. India had on no makeup. Jordan had on no makeup. I had on
It's
no
all right, because guess
Okay.
what? Baby's gonna smear off all your makeup, so you just have to let that go.
makeup.
Babies don't care about that. They
Oh
just,
my goodness.
they want that kiss. That's it.
Oh, she's beautiful. Hmm.
Where,
15.
where'd she put it? Did she just send it to, where is it?
Text
Yes.
it. Mhm.
Oh, okay. Oh, oh my goodness. Look at this.
5.
What an angel.
Oh, I gotta give this to, gotta post it for the morning stars.
Change the world, change the world. Yes, we can. We can change the world. We can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world. I am breathing.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. About to post some pictures of baby India just in a few minutes. Once I'm able to step away from this for a hot second, you're gonna love these pictures. You're gonna love them, love them, love them, love them. 3 generations of the Furholden family. We love it, love it, love it. I'm Santita Jackson. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. And I want you to call me or text me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278, or WCPT. How are you going to get through this holiday in the pandemic? Yep, people are going to have picnics this weekend. People are going to grill and they're going to breathe over the grill because how else can you do it? Will they be wearing a mask as they're grilling? Will you have an open air well, you put all the food out in the open buffet, which is what we generally do. Is that wise? How will you be getting to the celebrations, whether it's far away or whether it's down the street? How? We've got a lot to talk about with Dr. Shanina Knighton, scholar from Case Western Reserve University. Indeed, she is a registered nurse and an infection preventionist, one of the few in the world. But you wanted to share something with us, Dr. Deborah Verholden, before we got into it. And of course, Pastor Williams is still with us. We're so glad about that. Dr. Verholden.
So for the weekend and for people's safety, and we already know what's going to happen. And I will say, I want to let everybody know flu season is coming early this year. So these same protections will also help you around flu season. I'm going to give people the same basic things, but I'm going to try to give it to you in a way that's easy to remember. You got the 3 W's and the 3 D's. The 3 W's, wear your mask, wash your hands, watch your density, your distance, your duration. So your density, avoid large gathering. If you are going to be at a large gathering, outdoor is. If you end up having to move indoors and you notice it's a little too many people for your comfort, it's a little few too many people that are unmasked. And honestly, watch too. If you see people in there sneezing or they seem, don't quite seem like they're tip-top shape, you might want to consider leaving. So watch the density, how many people you're around, and outdoors is best. Your distance. You should be able to keep some distance to people. And your duration, how long you choose to stay in these types of environments. And I think Dr. Knighton did a great job of kind of walking us through, if you're at an event, this is a really fun public health graduate students do. It's a charity lunch event, and there's no break of salmonella. And you've got to identify. And it's tuna salad is served, egg salad, potato salad, different servers, all these different people. It's a really fun exercise because what it shows us is there's so many places where contamination can occur. So if you are at an event, know this, and you are handling the serving utensils, and somebody in there has COVID, the chances of you contracting greater because we just are these practices. So do things. Consider getting in line first. Consider before you go on for the fellowship. But practice those, the 3 W's. Watch your density, distance, and duration at these events.
How long do you think people should stay?
I think the amount of time you would stay should be a function of 2 things. Number 1, your good time. Ask yourself, is it worth it? Because I do know that people are also, they're lonely. And they're tired of being, having missed any important holidays and all those other things. If you are able to have a good time and feel safe, then I would, sort of calibrate based on that. This has happened to me. I've gone places and there have been absolutely where I went somewhere and then I looked back an hour later and there were twice as many people. I just choose to leave. This actually happened with me with a professional event. I was one of the first people there. I was sitting in the front, and by the time everybody got there and I looked back, people weren't honoring the spacing and the seating and things like that. So I was there for about an hour. I think an hour or two is sufficient for these types of events. And again, there are things that could have that time even be cut short. So if there are too many people and there's not good protocols in place, I would leave for my own protection. Yeah, I'm having a really great time. I just don't think right now that the risk. I met a young woman 2 days ago who has long COVID, 10 years old. With the capillaries under her eyes have popped. This is related illness. I forgot what it's called. I'll find out and I'll tell you on Monday. But the top, so she has this like strange look now in her face. She has cardiac issues and she has ongoing and lingering breathing. It took 3 months for her sense of taste and smell to return. And she says even now it's returned, but it's off. Tastes like perfume. Like her sense of taste and smell is off, and she now smells bad to herself. She has her ending always smell of garlic that's always with her. I couldn't smell it. She said none of her friends smelled it, but she smelled it, and she lived with it. Remember the Texas Roadhouse had that condition with the chronic ringing in the ears after COVID, and he died. Evidently, that is like a debilitating with this never-ending ringing in your ear. Again, these are the long COVID. These are the things that we really don't talk about because everybody is focused on this low death rate. And I try to tell people there's things besides death that we want to prevent and avoid with this. There's a really great article written by Martin Luther where he talks about the role of citizens during the bubonic plague. Bubonic plague, another thing, person to person, a whole lot of death and disability. We had no vaccines back then. We didn't really have therapeutics back then. And the bubonic plague was taking people out in record numbers. And Martin Luther writes this really great piece around the role of priests and petulance, he calls it. And he was also a scholar, right? He was an academic. He had a university appointment, et cetera. And he says, I refrain from interacting with others except when necessary because he didn't want to be the person who would potentially be somebody that would take their life or lowly of their life. I mean, it just was so moving. We've got great scholars during the plague who are trying to take the cause for prevention and personal response, and to hear him talk about what he was to protect him and his wife, and how he basically went on a stay-at-home order and moved all of his work from the university to home so that he could ensure that he wouldn't be a vector and the person to spread this pestilence to others, but that he would continue from his home to try to study and understand the condition and its spread and what to do to stop it. So the fact that we have so much knowledge on what to do to prevent it, but we won't act on that knowledge, it's just really, really sad. But I'm glad for opportunity to elevate for people. There are things besides death that we're trying to prevent and reduce with our strategy.
And, because we're in a time in which we bad messaging, inaccurate messaging, not just changing information. People will have obscured the masks. Folks who were at the top who knew we needed masks, who told us we didn't need them. People, frontline workers, Black and brown people, couldn't get them, couldn't get tests, on and on and on. Not handled well. And it was not handled honestly in a time in which people do not trust institutions. So we have a bunch of compounding factors here because people want to be safe, want to be kept safe. but they need to trust the messengers and the messages that they deliver. Dr. Deborah Holden, you have brought this infection preventionist. Never even heard of that before. And introduced me, Dr. Shanina Knight, and registered nurse infection preventionist. She is a research scholar at Case Western Reserve University, and you can walk us what we should be doing in Labor Day weekend. I mean, this is like the last hurrah of the summer. People are going to be out in the parks this weekend. You're going to smell the barbecue. People are going to be in their backyards or in their front yards or wherever. And we're going to be able to gather over the barbecue and the potato. Oh my goodness, my mouth watering just thinking about all of it. But we've got to do it safely. And we've got to get there. So talk to me. What happens if it rains? I mean, just walk us through getting through a Labor Day picnic, getting there, all of that.
Good morning.
Good morning.
First, I would say I want to know who's coming. So that whole thing before where it's called before you come or know who's showing, this is not the time for them to bring their friends, inside of your, or that you're not aware. So it's already one thing that you might have family members or close people that you've been in contact with, but then it's like you're interacting with strangers. So it's important for who's coming. The second thing is have protocol for inside or outside. So if you come to your home, you want them to sanitize their. If you're saying, make sure that everyone takes off their shoes when coming home. Whatever those codes be for safety, everyone is aboard before they come. Make sure the individual sending out a quick text and saying, hey, if you're not feeling well the day of, I'm great, but please don't show up. Just to make sure that I can keep others safe. So reminding people. I've seen situations of where individuals, in so many words, they stop caring about others' health because they're so busy trying to be in the know or be at the actual event. And it sounds like this is crazy, but it's the real thing where someone will say, okay, well, I mean, my cough wasn't that bad, so I just decided to go on. Or, oh, I wasn't really feeling that well, but I didn't really want to miss holiday. This is not the time for that. And so you would want to encourage the individuals that, or if you are the host, showing up to not show up if you are sick, but be able to make them a plate if it's about the food. The other thing is when individuals are coming in, just as I mentioned, wise. So, okay, you take the fact that there's, hand sanitization that they can go and be able to claim that they need to do. Expectation at the event is that you want everyone masked. Individuals before they come, so do one or two things. Individuals that want to be masked, knowing that you're going to have protocols and feel more safe about. And then those that don't want to wear a mask, it gives them the option whether or not they want to show up with the mask on. Because if they decide that, hey, I don't want to come to this event because I don't want to wear a mask, then if it's inside, that's for your safety, the fact that you've let them know that that's what your expectations are in order for them to be able to come. The other thing about it is I know that Santita talking about duration of time at the event. I'm going to let y'all know right now, when the drinking start getting heavy at an event, any event that I go to, I'm already out the door because I know that people's practices are going to get sloppy. I know the speech going to start slurring, which means that there's more droplets that can transmit. I'm gone. So you have to also, too, be able to make that assessment at the event is, okay, like I know that there may be some wine and alcohol involved and everyone's becoming a little bit more friendly. This might be my time in order for me to exit. Yes, it may be a good time for me to sit and laugh. Just understand that people are going to sanitize less. It's just like if you're in healthcare and you're fatigued. If you're in healthcare and you're fatigued, then all your infection prevention practices may not stay up to par like they need to as a healthcare provider. The science shows it. It's the same exact thing when you are under the influence of alcohol. Same way you have impaired breathing, it's going to be the impaired judgment when it comes to masking properly, mask still, sanitizing your hands, forget what distance is because they get lonely, just as I mentioned. So the big factors around holidays, so advise people to pay attention to. Just consciously remember that if you having people over, consider container. Yes, while I understand that they are not environmentally friendly, as in you have some way or some way for people to be able to grab up opposed to having to all spoon, it the contamination of the spoon handle unless you are going to come through and clean it. But thinking about that cleaning, you asking yourself, what can I do outside of just washing it? Honestly, nothing. You don't want to put a disinfectant wipe on there because then you got to worry about that food. Another reason to not want to service, all of y'all seen this, but sometimes when the food starts getting low in the pan, then that spoon ends up inside the pan. So that spoon is now touching the last macaroni and cheese. And so whoever, just like Dr. Deb said, so get served first. You'll want to get your food first, or in that particular instance, if you are the host, try to prevent things like that from happening by giving individual quantity of food by having like some sort of containers to be able to put it in. Same thing with drink nozzles. Think of drink nozzles. If you have drink dispensers at the either have one person constantly touching them, meaning they're banning the drinks. If not, then also too make sure that you have a protocol in place to wipe it down if they will be touched. If your family cookouts, we play cards, we play games, we talk a lot of mess over a table, which means that there's going to be some hollering and shouting. The hollering and shouting over those tables means that there are droplets that are potentially falling on those tables. Make sure that at least once every hour, those tables are being wiped down so that we decrease the concentration of droplets. That way, when someone else comes to sit there and eat their food or comes to sit down and play, they're not sitting in someone else's droplets, or the chances of them sitting in someone else's droplets is less.
But wipe down with what?
So
Not, is it water? Is it Lysol? Is it alcohol? Is it peroxide? How do you wipe? How do you wipe it? What do you wipe it down with? The table.
If you have, you can do like how we would do a rag with soap and water. That's acceptable. If you want to do a disinfectant wipe, then you can, like on a table surface. You can do alcohol if you want to. So it's fine. Any of those products, just as long as it's wiped down. Thinking of products, and I have to say this, and it's related to Labor Day, but not related to Labor Day. If you are one of use disinfectant products, cleaning products, and you spray it on the surface, hurry up and wipe it real fast, then you likely are not killing anything. So I hate to bring that up. Essentially, you are spreading the germs around. You're just moving the germs from one location to another. On every single disinfectant bottle, there's called a contact time. That is the amount of time that a solution, if you have to let that solution sit surface in order to do its job and work before you wipe it up. Some products a minute, some products have a contact time of 60 seconds. One of those individuals that don't feel like you can wait, make sure you are testing your disinfectants based off of the contact time. If you are not paying attention to the contact time and you're one of those people that's like, oh, let me hurry up and spray and wipe this surface, then I'm letting you know you're just spreading what you think you're killing. Even if it says that it's killing coronavirus, you are not allowing it to sit for the amount of time that it says on the bottle. So if it says 2 minutes of contact time, if you're not spraying it, allowing it to sit for 2 minutes, it's not working.
Wow, Dr. Deb, this, even wiping down the card table and wiping down the table after each use, all of that, it's very important. Let me ask you this, Pastor Williams, do you are in the public space?
Yes. I don't have any questions, but I absolutely I agree wholeheartedly. The tips that are shared are amazing. I certainly agree with the time and when to leave. You know, is a party. People come to party and to unwind, and you do know the more people begin to drink and the more they eat, they do get lax. And I'm with Dr. Knighton that that's pretty much a good indicator of when it's time to leave. Interestingly enough, we're still, as I said earlier, we won't know the effect of what summer brings until the fall. And so I'm still very cautious, still only in service one Sunday a month. As a matter of fact, we have a survey out right now polling the congregation as to how often they want to come back, because I still want to be very thoughtful about what's happening. Get lax, not let our guard down, especially when we talk about variants and things of that nature. So this is just super helpful for us, especially again, party beach town. This town, we are so crowded here. This is scary. It's scary.
Oh, absolutely. I have one more question for you, Dr. Knighton, and then I need to, to roll this up for us. Renee Criswell writes in, CPS Chicago doesn't seem to want to keep students safe. She said they don't require daily health screenings, temperature checks for this school year. They haven't done any tests for anyone this school year. The rooms are not sanitized. What do you make of that, Dr. Knight, in 2 minutes?
Express that sometimes if you can't drive it from the school district, then you need to drive it from the standpoint of the parents. And the question comes is, are the parents aware of what's happening with their children and their safety? As Dr. Deb mentioned earlier today, COVID does have long-term effects. And as I mentioned to anyone, my priority for my kids is to make sure that they don't get it. It's, not, hey, the kid's not going to have bad severity of it. Just like we have certain diseases of certain eras, I believe that this is but it is going to cause harm to future generations. And so that message would have to be driven from the home setting and the parent setting, because unfortunately, financial reasons, political reasons, I do think that some of the decisions being made by some organizations necessarily in the interest of people. It's in the interest of money, and in the interest of resources. And so right now, and it's just like, Santita mentioned about the bubonic plague, this is you having to take your own protocol. What is going to keep you safe? Because like I will tell anyone, when you look up, will you say to yourself, oh, pandemic? Will you say that, hey, me going to my job is what caused me to end up sick from the pandemic? So you have to have risk-lowering measures you do, to be safe, even if sometimes employer may not have the best knowledge to infection prevention. So in this particular instance, I would advise them to make sure that they are educating their kids, simulate with my kids how to clean their hands, to make sure that they're going to do it at school correctly. Same thing with mask wearing. They don't listen, that's on them. I said, but at least try to do your due diligence and teach. It is important because as we start to go inside the school year, there is no question about whether or not these numbers are going to be worse. If they look like this during the summertime, when it's summer months and people are outside, in regards to how they are getting ready to look this winter, it is no question about it. It's no doubt about it. Come on now, we got RSV cases increasing already during the summertime, and we're not even inside. Some of those kids were because of childcare reasons, so people can get back to work. But my point in saying that is, if you are going to start preparing your infection prevention practices, now is the best time. For my educators, if you are inside of a classroom setting, turn the heat up and open up the windows so that way you can have open ventilation. Now is not the time to want concentration of air inside of one setting without there being adequate air exchange. These are for schools that may not have an updated HVAC system. If you can open up a window, open up a window.
Dr. Deb, the last minute and a half belongs to you.
Well, it's all good stuff. So, people got the insight, they got the knowledge, they got the information. What they do with it will be the most important thing about how this weekend goes. I remind people, if we go back and look at the trends that we've seen in the past, we always have this post-holiday. Not have that with when the post-holiday phenomenon, which is the uptick in cases in the week following the holiday. is when we had government intervention. And we now see we're just simply not going to get that government intervention. So it is up to people to intervene on and for themselves. Um, I cannot stress enough. I don't want people or need people to be living in fear. I don't need people to be afraid and not willing to be out and engaged. I just want people to be mindful and do it in ways that are responsible. You know, that's it. And I think it can be done and it should be done. And like she said, you want to know people's status and you want to look around and know who's there. These are important conversations now to be having with families. There's still a bunch of people who are actual COVID deniers who don't think that COVID is real. I wouldn't be too inclined to be at the cookout with people who take that posture. You know, it's one thing for people to say, I'm not getting vaccinated right now, I'm not comfortable with it, etc. Something altogether different. If somebody doesn't even believe that COVID exists, then what's the likelihood that they're, practicing any kind of safety or protection? So,
Well,
I just encourage people to be safe and fellowship and have a great but safe weekend.
amen, everybody. COVID does exist, everybody. It's real. It's real. It's real. It's real. It's real. Please protect yourselves. Protect yourselves. Swiss cheese. That is what Dr. Deborah Verholden has said. We've got to have that approach. It's a lot of different layers of protection, first and foremost, and start thinking, everybody. I'm Santita Jackson. Was what happened to this boy in 2019? Why did it take 2 years for 5 people who aided and abetted his? Now they've been charged with killing him. Why did it take 2 years for us to get an indictment? And voting in Texas. What's up with that? Back in just a minute. Thank you much. Oh boy. No. How about that?
Right.
No.
How Dr. Knighton always changes our agenda. See you going in one way.
I mean,
Oh, I think, yeah, Dr. Deb said that. She said just do it safe. And that's the whole thing. So when you're aware, but no, it's not it's showing them how to live amongst the pandemic, being sheltered in. Because that's the problem. We know mental health wise that's not going to work. Mm-hmm. So my thing is let me show you how to live, not necessarily how to die.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Then too, Santita, something else. She said something. Oh no, Dr. Deb said it, and she was like, the people that say that they don't, like that they just absolutely don't believe in COVID. That is the absolute truth, and that was one of the things some time ago that I wrote when I was talking about dating. Like when that's one of the first things that I tell people that they need to ask somebody. Yeah, it's how do they feel about COVID? Because I'm telling you, if you talking to somebody, if you the one that believe in vaccines and that person like I'm an anti-vaxxer, y'all gonna fall out already on the first date. But it's good to know that it means,
Attorney Hostler has joined us.
Gonna cause issues down the line. So, you want to make sure that you understand where people stand, especially right now in the time where everybody's just trying to stay safe and, live.
Amen to that. Amen. Agreement that we're going to have a problem, if the relationship's not going to work out. How about that? It's just it's not going to work out, you guys. And stop in the end before you're miserable in the end. How about that? A picture of you, the 3 generations. How about? Oh yeah, I wish I could have posted them all, but I had to choose one. I said, okay, I'll just periodically post. I said, there she is, and she just curled up,
falling in love more by the day.
In this pink.
Crazy.
Oh, I love it. Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. God bless you. Sending you much love, Pastor Williams, Dr. Knighton, Dr. Deb. Yeah. Sending you much love. I will be calling you. And you know what? Next week, I will be back on the air. Obviously, Monday, we're off for the holiday, but Tuesday, I'm going to be off as well. I'll be back on Wednesday. And Dr. Deb, we have to talk about dating in this pandemic. How about that?
I'd be curious what y'all got as somebody who came into the pandemic single.
Oh, man. You gotta have a pod, kid. You gotta have a pod. Ooh.
Right. Good morning. I just wanted to add on that. Good morning. This is CK. How's everybody doing?
We're doing great. How are you?
Good. So we're on Facebook Live, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. So I recall when the yes, I speak in tongues. So I recall when the pandemic started, there was a conversation amongst. I was at a virtual meeting with a bunch of lawyers, and then after we finished our business at MBA, we were talking, and some of the people on there were younger, and they were talking about dating, and I said dating. And they were like, yeah. I said, oh, wow. Well, people are dating during the pandemic, just because everybody was so afraid of, COVID as we were learning. And I'll never forget, one of the young women said, oh, yeah. I mean, we got to continue to live as we're learning. That's what I was curious. And so I think that on many levels, some people have just, they make it work. They make it work. I mean, especially the young, I hate to say younger. The younger they are, it's not that they throw caution to the wind, but I think for a lot of people, they never really understood and still may not understand how the virus was transmitted.
Mm.
And so they somehow didn't make the connection that intimacy could be one, if you're intimate with someone, that the virus could be transmitted that way. So anyway, I just thought I would share a moment in time at the beginning. This was maybe April of 2020, where some young folks, meaning they were between the ages of 30 and 40, were talking sort of cavalierly about, people hooking up.
Well,
hookups, that's what they called it.
Well, that young, life is barely real to them. Death,
right?
Show ain't real.
Well, you have to think about teenagers. In the beginning, the narrative was, because I remember my kids and I having this discussion, well, it's really, and they actually said the words, old folks are the ones who are really at risk. For like people like us and young folks, Mommy, it's not really something that we're going to get. Because the narrative was initially that children were safe. So for anyone who had teenagers, we all know what teenage hormones are like. There was a narrative out there that the younger people were okay.
Yeah.
And even if they contracted it, which was highly unlikely, this was, in the beginning, they would be okay because their systems were strong, they were young, barring any really, really significant medical conditions. That was the narrative.
Absolutely.
So for all of the kids in college and everything, they were continuing life as usual.
Stand by. I mean, the narrative has changed, and it changed a lot.
It has.
And then some things didn't change. I mean, it's just, we've been on a roller coaster ride. Remember the Ohio players love roller coaster? Goodness gracious.
Yep.
It's just every day.
Ohio players.
Oh, come on, girl.
I know.
Barrington.
That's a flash in the past. Ohio players.
Squirrel. Back in the day. Remember those album covers?
Yeah.
Yes. I'm going all the way back, y'all. Yes. Okay.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. The Santita Jackson Show. It's Friday, September 3rd, 2021, the beginning of the Labor Day weekend. Everybody sending much love to our workers and those who want to work and those one day who will be able to work. Let's respect and love people who work hard to keep us going. They too are in service to our country and our world. God bless all of the workers and those who want to be workers. I'm Santita Jackson. This is the Santita Jackson Show. I hope that you are having a great beginning of your Labor Day weekend holiday. Please be safe and well. It is Friday, September 3rd, 2021, and it's about 6 minutes after the hour. Let's get to some of these headlines. I want you to meet me here on WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, and the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook, and WCPT 820's uh, Facebook page. We're streaming there as well. I'm on Instagram, Santita Jackson IG, and I am also on Twitter at Santita J. So I want to hear from you guys. We're going to be talking about a couple of cases that have really, really been stirring. And so I want to talk about Elijah McClain, and then we're going to talk about voting at the bottom of the hour. Voting in Texas is much, much, much harder today. And what will that mean for the rest of us as these voting suppression laws have been passed in most of the country, most states all around the a high of 77 degrees, mostly cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 66 degrees, shower 131 points, closed up 21 points. The S&P 500 closed up 12. So Ray's going to be a great baseball weekend on Labor Day. Will be playing the Royals, and the Cubs were triumphant over the Pirates 6-5 yesterday. Well, everybody's still struggling with Hurricane Ida. Hurricane Ida and her stormy aftermath have gone from the Gulf of Mexico straight up to the Northeast, at least 58 people dead. The death toll as of yesterday rose to at least 44 across 4 states alone: New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania, where high winds and flash flooding left extensive damage and at least 200,000 homes without power. Days after the Category 4 hurricane first made landfall in the south of our country in Louisiana and Mississippi. The aftermath of Ida also got parts of Maryland, everybody. Flooding killed people in their homes, in their basements. People drowned, everybody. And then in Louisiana, fatalities unofficially climbed to 13. More are expected to be found not alive. 1 million people lost power on Sunday, and yet still hundreds of thousands of customers in Louisiana still have no electricity. Louisiana Governor John Bell Edwards said 25,000 utility workers were in the state to help restore electricity, with more on the way. In New Orleans, power was restored to a small number of homes and businesses. City crews cleared some streets of fallen trees and debris, and few corner stores, a few of them reopened. But remember, they're having trouble with their sewage system. Yes, we've got a lot to do. Officials declared Grand Isle, Louisiana, where Hurricane Ida first made landfall, uninhabitable. But property owners will be allowed to survey damage and remove personal effects today and tomorrow, everybody. And President Biden will New Orleans to meet with Louisiana state and local officials to personally put all of the available assistance from FEMA to of the country. Indeed, this equality, the climate crisis, that is what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she says, we're seeing an inequality crisis. She said among the people most at risk during flash floods where she is and all over the country are those living off the books and basement dwellings that don't meet the safety codes necessary to save, as I shared with you. People drowned in their basements. They drowned in their basements. Drowned in their basements. Think about that, everybody. Think about that. How awful is that? How awful is that? The coronavirus. Think about that this weekend. Please be safe, and please go to the podcast of the Santita Jackson Show so you can hear Dr. Deborah Holden and Dr. Shanita Knight and give you tips on how to stay safe at these picnics and at the parties that we will be attending, no doubt, this weekend for the Labor Day holiday weekend. More than 80% of Americans 16 and older have some level of immunity against coronavirus. Good news, mostly through vaccination, a new survey shows. The CDC conducted the survey of blood donations, and the results indicated that about twice as many people have been infected with the virus as have been officially counted. More than 39 million Americans have been diagnosed with coronavirus since the pandemic began last year. That's a little more than, that's about 12%. Absolutely. So think about that, everybody. Let's get right to it. Let's get to this Elijah McClain case. Every Wednesday on the Santita Jackson Show, legal Q&A with CK. That's right. We want to hear from her. She's helping us to really look at the issues of the day, and she'll be answering some of your questions, some of your personal legal issues. She's going to be on top of those too every Wednesday, but also she WAOK out of Atlanta, but you can hear it all over the world every Tuesday from Eastern Standard Time, doing the same. Elijah McClain, 4-year-old sensitive, introvert. He used to play the violin, animals, comfort to the animals, known for being a sweet, gentle spirit. Well, on August 24th, all of that beauty world, he was walking home from the store, according to this report, wearing a ski mask, headphones, and carrying a plastic bag with of. He was like very, very sensitive. And so a man called 911 to report his behavior as suspicious. He looked suspicious. And even though there was no crime nearby that had been reported, um, Officer Nathan Woodyard had nothing to investigate, but he confronted young McLean anyway. And according to an independent investigation of McLean's death, um, there was a problem. Within 10 seconds of exiting his patrol car, Officer Woodyard placed his hands on Mr. McLean. Mr. McLean had no observable weapon and had not displayed violent or threatening behavior, according to this report. No crime had been reported. Officer Woodyard's decision to turn what may have been a consensual encounter with Mr. McLean into it became an investigatory stop, and it escalated. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, and he ended up dead of how he acted. Was not exhibiting any violent tendencies. How he was, it's very, very disturbing, and how everybody behaved, how the police behaved, how the EMTs behaved. The EMTs did try to help him when they saw that he had vomited. Please walk us through this case and how everything has changed from 29. Attorney
Good
Hoffler?
morning, Santita.
Okay. Yes.
Yes, good morning, Santita. It's, this case evokes so much a sense of despair from many. It has elements of Ahmaud Arbery, who was jogging, minding his own business, just like this young man was walking and minding his own business. It evokes a sense of you just really just can't be Black sometimes in America and be left alone even when you're not being disruptive. So if I have to walk you through the case and why there were completely different outcomes by attorney generals in the same office in a 2-year span, I believe, Santita, it's because just as with Ahmaud Arbery, initially when authorities look at evidence, particularly as it relates to many Black victims, they look at it with presumptions, with bias, and through a lens that is oftentimes not the same lens that they would accord to white folks who are in the same predicament. The jury the verdict was in on Elijah McClain, from my humble impression in looking at this case from the beginning, from the inception, when there was a call about suspicious behavior from a young man. Not everybody looks at life the same way. Not everybody is linear. Not everybody walks the same, and not everybody speaks the same. We're all different. Even if you have a professional degree, there were many people that I was in law school with who had a different way of walking, a different way of talking, a different way of expression from all kinds of cultural backgrounds. And so that he was different is the story of many of our lives. Mm-hmm. So that is not which have arisen the suspicion. But his treatment, the brutality within which he was treated by police and the EMT is all too common. So the evidence did not change. The same evidence that existed in the beginning was the evidence that existed in the end. The same evidence during a 2-year period. But it was the approach of that office that made the difference. And and this does happen. We saw it happen in the Ahmaud Arbery case, where you might have people, and they're pulling back the layers of the onion in this case. So there's a lot of new information that's coming out. What do you say to account for non-indictment and an indictment? Is because you had different attorney generals, different prosecutors that were looking at the case.
But let me ask you this. Did they know this in 2019? I mean, that the officer himself admitted that he felt safe approaching this young man because he didn't appear to have any weapons and he didn't appear to be a threat. And this young man was also wearing headphones, right, CK? So he said, Mr. McLean said, he didn't hear the officer's initial command. And then they grabbed his arms and they forcibly moved him over to a grassy area. I'm reading from a report. And they pushed him up against the exterior wall of a nearby apartment building. And mind you, he was almost home, everybody. And during this interaction, this young man said, and he's a boy, we look at him as a son, CK. He said, I'm just different. I'm just different. That's all. That's all. That's all I was doing. I'm so sorry. I have no gun. I don't do that stuff. I don't do any fighting. Why are you attacking me? I don't do guns. I don't even kill flies. I don't eat meat. I'm a vegetarian. The three officers at that point wrestled him to the ground, with one claiming evidence that he was going for one of their guns. Okay? Choked until he lost consciousness. When he regained consciousness, he begged for his life, CK, saying he could not breathe. He vomited. The EMTs arrived. They did not, and they saw the vomit coming out of his nose and out of his mouth, trapped behind that mask. They did nothing to help him. I mean, they gave him this substance. This boy was 5'6", about 143 pounds. They gave him the substance that would have arrested a man at 6 feet, more than 200 pounds. And it killed him. How does that happen, CK? I mean,
Well, to answer how does it happen? To answer your first question, yes. In 2019, they had the same information that they had in 2000.
information.
They had all that information. The information from the officers saying they didn't think that he had a gun, that he had a this, that he had, his demeanor didn't change from 2019 to 2021.
Ooh.
The officers that saw him, nothing changed whatsoever in his demeanor and what Elijah McClain did and what he said. And it was all information that they knew and had access to when there was a decision not to indict. The EMTs, nothing changed between 2019 and 2021. So that's what I'm saying, Santita. We can look at it through, there were some differences and distinctions, if you will, between when people were looking at, the medical examiner report and all that. This was how sometimes you might have like what they said with George Floyd, which was bogus as well. He was a big, angry man. He was a big, angry, imposing man who was on drugs and needed to be restrained. Remember that testimony?
Oh, yeah.
Well, this was a smaller, innocent young man. And let me just tell you what it evokes for me, because I do know young men and young women like this. Sometimes people are on the spectrum. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people have ADHD. Sometimes people they're just a little bit, they beat to a different drum.
Asperger's, all that.
They're criminal. Yeah. Asperger's, that's what I said, they're on the spectrum. Mm-hmm. I know at least two children, now they're 18 or 19, in college, fully matriculated, who are on the spectrum, who have Asperger's, and they're very literal. So it sounded to me when I read about this, Santita, when I read about this case, it sounded to me as though he had perhaps some of those elements, or maybe he didn't. But he himself, in expressing himself, said, I'm different. And the reason why I felt that he might have had something like that is because he was trying to explain, to save his life, that I may have odd reactions, but don't kill me. Don't take this out on me. Don't hurt me. And that's the tragedy of this. That's the tragedy. So now, even when someone is innocent and Black and is explaining he has a condition that he might feel that people think is odd, because he's been trained by his family and by professionals to say that, the outcome is the same. But let's be clear. With very few exceptions, the same information was known in 2019 as in 2021, or they had access to it. And that is the standard. They must leave no stones unturned. The only difference was the prosecutors who looked at the file. The only difference is maybe people look at it different lens now after the outcome of the George Floyd vindication.
So the politics
The Derek Chauvin
changed.
trial. The politics changed. Individuals change. And we see this throughout the country.
Hold on, I've got your pearl.
And
I've got your pearl. I only have a few minutes left in the segment, but I want you to interact with her, because this is, when you read the details of this case, CK, it is just devastating. 'Cause this poor child, he was just helpless, and you can see I'm sure he was proud to be able to live on his own. You know, his family had worked to get him, to make him independent, and this happened. Chaparral, what's on your mind?
Yes, Santita, thank you so much for taking my call. Good morning, CK. I mean, when I heard the story and the details, I had to decompress, because you take, as a survivor of a family member who has been murdered, and police actually did nothing to save my son's life, it just took me back. So I actually had to decompress myself to actually even to read the details of the story, because it reminded me so much of what happened with Courtney. Because of the fact that, this child, once again, we're seeing Black men beg for their lives, and they're doing nothing wrong. And the fact that, it took so long for this prosecutor to actually bring forth charges, but also makes me hopeful that, even they can go back even further in different cases, and maybe even with Courtney, if we could get some more evidence, this could help. Because I've always stated to everyone that what happened to my son, and just so that everyone would know, is that Courtney was shot. What we know about his case, he was shot, and he was actually allowed to die in front of Santita. They did nothing to save him. They handcuffed him while he was dying, and they treated him like a suspect as opposed to a victim. And so I always state that these things happen more often than not. This type of treatment of Black and brown people, it doesn't get the national coverage. It doesn't get the outpour and outcry from Black Lives Matter groups and things like that, because of the fact that they don't see you pulling a trigger. They don't see a knee on the neck. But these type of things happen more often, Santita, than we are even privy to understand. And if they didn't have the video of what happened in the situation, I'm not even sure in the audio of what was going on that we would even get this far. I mean, not only to add insult to injury, what happened to Elijah, the cops, they went back and they mocked him. They laughed at him. They talked about how he was suffering as if they had no remorse. And I also see that there is a clear allegiance, and I even see it with Courtney's case. Courtney, the paramedics was on the scene with Courtney within 3 minutes, and they didn't leave for 13 minutes. So why weren't they administering care to my son? And we see that in Elijah's case, they were on the scene and they did not administer care to the child.
Well, wait a minute, but they gave him a shot. They gave him a shot that killed him. I only have about pearl, because I want to bring CK on before we close the segment.
I know. I'm just saying they're supposed to help you, and we've grown to understand that you call the police, you call the paramedics for help, and these people who are trained to serve and protect are the ones that are killing us, and it's crazy.
And they gave this boy a shot, CK, a shot of a medicine that they didn't even measure out. They gave him 500 milligrams. Someone of his size should have been 325. They just shot him, and it killed him. He was in the hospital, for 6 days? And then he died. I mean, I've got 2 minutes left, CK. Well, really just under 2 minutes, 90 seconds. What's our takeaway?
Let me just go. Takeaway is this. We have to be vigilant. And Chaparral, my heart goes out to you. There were so many similarities. My heart goes out to you. Just goes out to you. And thank you for your strength and for what you bring to this horrible discussion. The takeaway from a legal standpoint is this. We have got just how this family equipped this young man to save his life. We shouldn't be discouraged. We have to continue doing that. Continue giving our children tools to live. Our black boys, our black girls, tools to live, because this could happen to anyone. The second thing is, I believe there is medical negligence in this case.
1 minute.
So the reason why I say that is whenever you have EMTs who administer anything, that's a medical thing. That's a medical issue. There's negligence on the police, but there is a civil cause of action against the EMTs. Civil cause of action, because they are medical professionals. They had a duty to assess, evaluate, and triage him, and not treat him like he was an animal, which is what they did. Not ridicule him because he may have been different. Not treat him like not even a human being.
Mm-hmm.
So there is medical negligence, and I certainly hope and pray that this family will pursue a civil action for medical negligence against the EMTs. They may very well be doing that.
15.
Right now they're grieving.
Sure.
Because of their son, and they're saying
10.
justice has been delayed.
That's
but
it.
Thank God there is some measure of justice.
5.
That's what the family is saying now. But I hope and pray that there's someone who has said to this family, you may have a cause of action for medical negligence, and that the statute of limitations has not run.
Stay right
That's
there,
my
everybody.
prayer.
Amen. Amen to that. Amen to that. Shapiro, you know, our hearts are with you. Our hearts are with you. Our hearts are with the McLean family. They're just with you. It just happens far too often. Everybody, let's talk about the vote. We'll talk about something that is being removed from us in Texas and all over the country. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm sorry I was pushing, but you know what? When you all hear my voice, I got to go. I'm up against the clock. But
Right.
Shapiro, do you want to say anything else? And CK?
I do quickly. I'm hoping that, you know, when in looking at the similarities between Elijah and Courtney's case, I'm just hoping that, you know, more evidence comes forth, because one of the things that I found that CK, I know I wish I would have found you a long time ago, CK. I swear to God I do, but because I think that you just give a wealth of knowledge and resources to these types of cases. And what I found is that most of the lawyers who looked at Courtney's case, they wanted a smoking gun. They wanted to see.
We have Mr. Daly.
Because sometimes these type of cases, they just take a lot of legal wide and legal maneuvering to try to get the case to where it needs to be. I still think that it's a lot to uncover when it comes to Courtney's case. A lot of things that have been hidden from us, and a lot of things that are still unknown. So I'm hoping that that we uncover some more information. But I think that, you know, what I wanted to say is that what I found out is that, you know, there is a statute of limitations on certain types. If you're suing the city, you have like a year. If you're suing like any state entity in Illinois, you have a year to bring forth these claims. And so that's because it could be over a year to even find out what the heck happened. And then I was always behind the clock trying to catch up and trying to find somebody to support me legally to pull forth these claims against the city and state, because, you know, they feel like, okay, the handcuffing was bad, but they don't feel that it was, you know, a grievance. I don't understand. For me, it's inhumane, and for my son to be treated like that. But a lot of people, a lot of lawyers didn't think, well, they didn't shoot him. You know what I'm saying, CK?
Yeah, you know, and I really truly regret that. What you're referring to is an ante litem notice. So when you're suing, if a state, a city, or a governmental entity is potentially a defendant, you have to put them on notice. And in different jurisdictions, some jurisdictions it's 6 months, some it's a year. But the standard throughout the country sometimes is roughly a year. But you have to put them on notice because they're governmental entities before you can be in a position to sue them. Whereas the EMTs that intervene, that's a private entity. That's a medical service that they provide. That the notice for that would be whatever the medical negligence statute of limitations is in that jurisdiction. That is what they would be subjected to. They are not, unless they are a state-run entity. A lot of times they are private, and different states have different protocols as it relates to EMTs as well. But a lot of times the ambulance services in different states and different communities, they're companies, they're privately owned. But this is a medical, but the lack of medical.
Okay, I'm going to have to let you all go.
Separate issue from the rest. Okay,
Well,
Santita,
I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry, Shapiro, and keep on fighting, uncovering, even if the statute of limitations have run, because it's your piece that you need to find.
Sending you
And
both
something
much
that
love.
is never going to make sense.
Thank you so
All right.
much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. I'm sorry I'm running, everybody, but I'm up against
No
this
worries.
clock.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye, Shapiro.
Okay. Love you, Shapiro. Love you, CK. Have a great weekend, everybody. All right, let's get right into it, everybody.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. I'm Santita Jackson. It is Friday, not August. It's not August anymore. It's September 3rd, 2021. I'm Santita Jackson coming to you from WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want you to meet me on the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook. Everybody like and share, like and share. I had a lot of great information today. And WCPT, please, we're streaming on Facebook there as well. We've had some trouble on YouTube today. I'm sorry about that with the sound, but I'm going to work on this microphone and such over the weekend. I hope you have a safe holiday weekend. As we talk to Dave Daly about our voting rights in Texas. Texas has had a whole lot going on. I mean, 666 laws. You can read that any way you want to, everybody. It took effect on Wednesday. Many of them conservative, so-called, or right-wing priorities. I mean, not just the voting laws, but the voting laws are of great concern to us because Texas was already the most voter restricted and voter restricting state in the country. Now it is even harder to vote in Texas, even harder to vote in Texas. And indeed, this is from the French news agency. The Texas legislature on Tuesday passed the final version of a bill restricting voter access that sparked a weeks-long political showdown that is expected to be signed quickly into law by the state's Republican governor. Both the State House of Representatives and State Senate, each controlled by Republicans, approved the measure that would outlaw drive-through and 24-hour voting locations and add new identification requirements for mail-in voting. It would also prevent election officials from sending out unsolicited mail-in ballot applications. Republicans across the United States have pushed similar legislation, and they went on to say that this hampers disproportionately voters of color. Now, this is coming out of France. David Daly, the author of Unrigged and Rat Effed from Fair Vote. Overseas, they are clear that this is going to disproportionately impact people of color. In a state that has one of the fastest growing states in the country, 90+% of their growth has been driven by people of color. What happened? What will these new laws? How will it change voting as we have known it in Texas?
Thanks for having me on. I think you make the key point here, which is that Texas has always been a very difficult state to vote, and that now it will be even more so. You've got to go to some pretty serious extremes if you're going to make it more restrictive than Texas already was. And Texas looks like a red state on the map, right? But it's really a voter suppression state. Texas, on the eve of the 2018 election, was right around 50th in the nation in voter participation. And it's not because people in Texas don't want to vote or don't love democracy. It's because their state makes it very, very difficult for them to cast a ballot. Much of what in this new proposal that will become law with Governor Abbott's signature and to be in effect ahead of the 2022 primaries and elections in Texas is really a response to efforts that were made in Texas in 2020 largely by local and officials to increase participation and drive up turnout, easier and safer for voters to cast a ballot in the midst of the pandemic. So, as you mentioned, what we're talking about here is really Republicans move quickly to outlaw things that largely Democratic-leaning counties did in 2020 successfully to raise turnout. They are noticing what worked, and they are putting a clampdown on it quickly. So it is things like in Harris County, which is home to Houston, where local officials did all kinds of creative things as far as 24-hour voting, overnight voting, drive-through voting. 1 in 10 voters in Harris County use that drive-through voting. They are putting an end to drive-through voting. They're putting an end to overnight voting. They are limiting voting in counties like Houston and Harris County to specific hours, but they are then expanding the hours and access to the polls in the rural conservative counties that favor Republican candidates. And then, as you mentioned, there are lots and lots of things in this bill that effectively will put election officials at risk of felony charges for minor things that probably shouldn't be against the law in the first place. So if an election official sends an application to vote out to somebody who doesn't specifically ask for it, that is now illegal. If an election official tells a poll watcher who is disruptive to leave, they are potentially opening themselves up for a felony charge and a year in prison. There are monthly citizenship checks of the voting rolls in here, and we all know what happened in Texas 2 years ago when they tried to do this, and it was a disaster, and more than 100,000 people ended up having their voting applications essentially flagged because they came up in Texas's database as not being citizens because they had said so when they got their driver's license, but they had become citizens in the years since then, and Texas's databases weren't sophisticated enough to pick this up. So there is a lot in here that is really, really bad for voting access and voting participation in the state of Texas. And all of it goes in one direction to make it more difficult for low-income voters and people of color to cast a ballot and easier for rural conservative Texans to cast theirs.
And it is making it easier for rural conservative Texans to vote and harder for urban brown and black Texans to vote. Is there any remedy? We're right up on 22. I mean, we're right here. I mean, the U.S. Senate and the House could actually change hands just like that, just in a few months.
Yeah. What is so difficult here, and without a doubt, this legislation will wind up being challenged in court. The question is, how will these restrictions now be received by federal courts that have been hollowing out the protections of the Voting Rights Act systematically? Back in 2013, when the Shelby County versus Holder case essentially put an end to the pre-clearance provision, Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, that freed Texas and other states that had a history of racial prejudice in their voting laws to make changes without the approval of the government any longer. That very afternoon is when they put into place their draconian voter ID bill. That's the one that famously made it okay to vote with a gun license and not a student ID, among other things. And you had a case earlier this year, the Brnovich versus DNC case that the Supreme Court decided back in June that really put new limits on Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And it set up a different standard than Congress had intended to try to judge the impact of these laws on communities of color. And it essentially says now that even if there is some disproportionate impact on voters of color, that is okay, especially if the state is acting in the service of trying to prevent a voter fraud. You had a decision by Justice Alito that effectively argued that you're always going to have some kind of disproportionate impact on any law, but if the law is passed with the intent of trying to end voter fraud, that the state has an interest in doing that, and if there is some small disproportionate impact, that's okay. The trouble is that first, that's a cramped view of the law, and it's not the intention of those who passed and then reauthorized the Voting Rights Act. It is Justice Alito, a supposed constitutionalist, originalist, putting his own stamp on this and effectively making the law up as he goes along. But really the danger here is that as you add in provision after provision after provision, that makes it more and more difficult for communities of color, especially, to vote, that in close states, in quickly changing states, what you are doing is just skimming enough votes with each one of these that you can really affect impacts. You had two of the most quickly changing states in the country this year with Georgia and Arizona. The final difference between Joe Biden and Donald Trump in those states, it was like 10,000 votes in each of those states. So you don't have to skim a lot of votes with procedures like this to make a huge difference and to perhaps even tip an election.
Well, and Donald Trump showed you that because he said in Georgia, I'm just looking for 11,000 plus votes. That's all I need. And in fact, President Biden didn't win by 8 million votes? What did he really win by, David?
Yeah, President Biden, we think he won a landslide, right? Of, 7.7 million votes or something. But, if three states had gone in another direction, Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona, states that were won by a total of 43,000 votes, you've got a very different election. I mean, you are right on the verge of a tied electoral college at 269, and this election going into the U.S. House, where it would have been decided not by individual House members, which would have tipped it blue, but by each delegation. So each of the 50 states, their delegation gets one vote. Republicans have more delegations. So we were about 45,000 votes shifting away from a very different outcome of this election.
We're talking with David Daly about the new voter restrictions. There are more voter restrictions in Texas. Texas is the most voter restricted state in the United States, and it is going to be even more difficult to vote. Well, that's not exactly true. Let me be more precise. David, correct me if I'm wrong. It'll be more difficult to vote in urban Texas, where Black and brown people live, in suburban and rural Texas, where white conservatives live, just painting broadly. But it'll be easier to vote. Uh, Talk to me. I mean, what is happening throughout the country with respect to this? I mean, is this just a Texas problem or is this our problem?
This is a national problem, and this is a particularly frightful problem because of how close so many of these states are, because how gerrymandered so many of these state legislatures that are passing these laws are. But this is a problem that goes all the way down to the roots of our local government, right? So we redistrict every 10 years in order to account for population changes, and we redraw the lines of state legislative and congressional districts after the census. We're engaged in this process right now. Republicans really captured this process back in 2011, and they were able to draw all of these lines in so many states around the country, especially competitive swing states. So this is a problem in Pennsylvania, in Ohio, in Michigan, Wisconsin, in North Carolina, Georgia, Texas, Indiana, Alabama. And it's these legislatures, it's these state legislatures that are enacting these particularly draconian voting laws that once they've already entrenched themselves in office, now they insulate themselves even to a greater extent. We have a growing problem in this country with entrenched Republican minority rule at just about every level of our government. I mean, after the 2018 election, there were 59 million Americans who lived in a state where one or both chambers of their state legislature were controlled by the party that won fewer votes in 2018. We just talked about the numbers and how the popular vote in the Electoral College can create that kind of extreme swing, and how that structurally favors the Republican Party right now. It's the same thing in the U.S. Senate, right? Which is a 50-50 Senate, but the 50 Democrats represent 41.5 million more people. You have 5 conservatives on the Supreme Court that were named by a Republican president who lost the popular vote over the course of the last 20 years, and then confirmed by that same U.S. Senate that is disproportionately weighted in the direction of smaller, rural, conservative states. The Democrats have got this window right now to try to do something about this, right? They could go ahead and pass the For the People Act and really put an end to this kind of partisan gerrymandering, and they could pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and restore the full protections of the Voting Rights Act that this U.S. Supreme Court has so brutally eviscerated over the course of the last decade. But if they don't do this, time is running out. I mean, Democrats, I think, are extraordinarily unlikely to hold on to the U.S. House in 2022, again, because of redistricting and the changes we're going to see to lines in many of these states that we've been talking about. This is their opportunity to do something, and it is particularly confounding and frustrating that they can look around the country, see what is happening to the very ideal of representative democracy, and not act when they have this chance.
Well, I'm trying to find out why why they won't. I mean, because there's something else going on here, David Daly, the author of Unrigged and Rat Effed, the best-selling Rat Effed, Why Your Vote Doesn't Count, Unrigged, How Americans Are Battling Back to Save Democracy. These are 2 must-have books. You got to read them. And, of course, he's from Fair Vote. You got to help me, David, because you don't have to end the filibuster. You can suspend it for specific votes. And to get these voting laws, the For the People Act, John Lewis, I mean, my goodness, you can get these laws through while you have the votes. That could happen like right away. But the Democrats won't do it. And the Democrats' base will be harmed. The Democratic Party will survive. They will survive. But the people who vote Democrat will not, David. So I'm trying to find out what are the interests driving this inaction That's all I can call it. I don't see Democrats moving with all deliberate speed. I see Republicans moving with all deliberate speed. I don't see Democrats doing that. And it's very distressing. It's very distressing.
No, I see this. I see the same thing. I think you're exactly right. What you have is a Republican Party that is moving to maximize its power in state legislatures wherever it can, and a Democratic Party that is effectively standing back and allowing this to happen. And they are not powerless. They control the White House and they control both branches of Congress. So they could do something about this if they chose to. They could begin to play by the same rules that the Republican Party has. Instead, they choose to be Charlie Brown on his back with the football. I want to make this clear. The impotence of the Democratic Party on this is a policy choice. It does not have to be this way. And it would require changing the law on the filibuster. It would require a carve-out for voting rights in the filibuster, which is not a law. It is a Senate rule. It is an arcane Senate rule that requires 60 votes to move something to the floor for passage. It has its own roots in white supremacy, in attempting to hold on to white power and to make it more difficult for civil rights legislation to come to the Senate floor over the course of our nation's history. And if Democrats don't do this, they will not be able to move any piece of their agenda because Republicans can simply block it in the Senate by invoking a filibuster. So yesterday, for example, when another Texas law, an extreme Texas law on reproductive rights that effectively banned abortion in the state after 6 weeks and turned citizens into bounty hunters to turn in their neighbors who were having medical procedures that have been constitutionally protected in this country for 5 decades. When the Supreme Court gutted Roe v. Wade cowardly in an unsigned statement issued at midnight, you had all of the Democratic leaders yesterday come out and, Chuck Schumer, we're going to fight this. Our fight is just beginning. Nancy Pelosi, we're going to codify Roe versus Wade. This is going to be an act of Congress. Joe Biden, this is an insult to the rule of law. Well, the filibuster is going to stop anything that you try to do on this. So Democrats are talking a good game on some of these issues. But if they're going to act on any of them, it's going to require a change to the filibuster. And
they know that.
8 months into this administration.
And David, they know that.
This is not a secret.
They know this. They know this. So my question is for you, why are they not doing it? I see on my chat line people saying that
it is a choice.
Okay,
it
yeah.
Is a choice.
Because it's not the money that politicians make. Take them out the mix, everybody. They're not the powerful ones here. You have to know who's running the politicians, okay? Joe Manchin is answering to the Koch family. That's who he's answering to, not the margin of victory for him in West Virginia, which is the black vote. He's not answering to them. And until people make some noise, until they push David, we're going to be here. The last 2 minutes belong to you.
No, I think that's exactly right. Listen, there are some really clear things that we have to do, and the urgency of them is absolutely upon us. We've got to end the filibuster in the Senate because Democrats will never move a single piece of their agenda if they do not. There are all of these things that Democrats talked about doing during the presidential campaign, things like adding Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. as states. Mm-hmm. Puerto Rico has a larger population than 21 American states, but it has zero representation in the U.S. Senate. That should change. the city of Washington, D.C. is larger than the state of Wyoming in population. Wyoming has 2 senators. Washington, D.C. has none. This would go a long way towards restoring structural, proportional fairness to the U.S. Senate. We've got to talk about how we fix the U.S. Supreme Court. We have to think about ending lifetime tenure for these justices. Mm. We have never had the number of justices fixed in the Constitution at 9. We have to think about adding more, how we would go about expanding and right-sizing this court, especially in response to the theft of 2 seats by the Republican Party. Republicans like to call this court packing.
1 minute.
They've been doing it in state after state after state that they control. They've done it in Georgia. They've done it in Arizona. They're doing it in Iowa. This is something that Republicans are already engaging in. The fact that Democrats will not take the steps to fix it, to address it, means that they are complicit in all of this. They are going to be the handmaidens of tyranny.
20.
They are going to be the enablers of the entrenched Republican minority rule if they do not begin to act and act now. The window that they have is closing.
5.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And everyone get David Daley's books, Rat Effed and Unrigged, 2 different books. And he talks about the plan. The plan. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. They have a plan to win, and that is what they are doing. But we should be winning. We're the majority. Come on, everybody. It's about being fair. About being fair. Have a wonderful weekend. Our love to all the workers. Thank you for your love and prayers. God bless you. Have a safe Labor Day. See you next week on the Santita Jackson Show. Thank you. Thank you, David. I'm sorry I was running out of here.
It's a pleasure.
Oh, my goodness. Whew.
How's the family?
Oh, you know what? Our parents are making really great strides. And I want to let everybody know that today. Oh, yeah. So we're really, really blessed. And, oh, yeah. But, there's so many things that can bedevil people, right? But we've been very, very blessed to work all of this through because it is what it is. And everybody is dealing with something, quite frankly. But we've been really, really blessed. I've been able to speak to my mother and father every day, sometimes a couple of times a day. They've tried to stop my father from doing a lot of talking because, that phone is like the third hand. And but we've been really, really blessed to get a chance to, in fact, I'm going to call my mother as soon as I get off the air. Just to check in, not to crowd her out too much so she can get a little bit of rest. Because in hospitals, you really don't get a lot of rest, everybody. You don't. And so, oh, yes, Miss D. Ray, we're looking for that. I just want them to come home nice and safe and well and healthy. How about that? So,
Amen.
But, that's what we want. And I want everybody, I know this is my parents' wish, that everyone would have access to equal high quality health care. That's the fight. That's the fight. That when you present with the suspicion of COVID, number one, we need you to be able to get the test. And then you need to be able to get the therapeutics that are available. You need the therapeutics. You need access to the shots, no question about that. We need transparency with that also, so that people's fears can be allayed. All of that. Just open up the doors, so that we can go on and come on. We can do it. And it can be done. It can be done. So, David, I want to thank you for reaching out. It's been a difficult time, but you got to function when life gets difficult. Hey, Keith Flute and everybody else, you got to function. You got to keep on going. And I want to thank you all for holding me up and keeping me aloft. And I just want to thank you, David, on a personal level, just as a friend, for reaching out. Thank you so much for all of your love and friendship. God bless you. And have a wonderful weekend. Absolutely. Paul, thank you for a great show. Have a wonderful holiday, Paul, with his family. He's got a house full. And everybody, God bless you. Have a wonderful, wonderful holiday. I will see you on Wednesday. I'm going to be off on Monday, like many people will be, and I'm going to be off on Tuesday as well. I'll be back here on Wednesday. But I love you, love you, love you. See you, see you, see you. And who knows, I might come around this weekend just a little bit. Love you. Thank you, David. God bless you.